So a couple things real quick about the presentation. I know we talked about, right, it says SharePoint workflows, but really what we're going to do is we're going to talk about automation, right? And I'll explain why we're really addressing automation and not necessarily just from the purview of just from SharePoint, okay? So here's the obligatory slide about me. Some of you have seen this before, that have seen me present. So you can see I've got 3 kids, right? One's a Marine, he doesn't like to be called a kid anymore. I've got my Bear Scout, so he's now about to become a Weeblo, my wonderful wife that lets me permit coaching my daughter and all the other soccer teams that I continue to coach in North Alabama. So I guess my biggest claim to not really fame, but shame is that I probably spent over 2,000 hours in nothing but InfoPath. It was a whole lot of, I think that's still why I have gray hairs coming in now. But it was a lot of pain. I spent, since about 2007, I've worked with Nintex, a third-party workflow application that you guys have the benefit of being able to use here. And then you can see I've also gone through and I've done the whole Lean Six Sigma Black Belt and all the other process improvement pieces. So enough about me. I work for a company called Summit 7 Systems, as did my Padre, Sean Hayes over there. So we've done pretty much everything under the sun when it comes to Microsoft, SharePoint, and Office 365. We're also one of only 4 vendors in the entire US that are able to sell the highest government cloud computing platform in the 365 environment. So we've been able to be recognized from our technical works as far as what we've been able to do from a solution standpoint, and also from a industry and a contribution standpoint. So when we think about everyday automation, so Sean and I were driving down here this morning, and he gets in his car and he's got a Toyota Camry. And so we're sitting here talking through, and we can't see, right, the indicator as far as like the radio station, any of the other things. And I'm like, man, you got to have an auto sensor. You got to have something in here. Like there's got to be a switch or whatever. So we're fooling around, we're looking through, and it dawns on me, right? Oh, there's this, I bet there's a little toggle button, a manual button up there near your, right, the tachometer. So it reaches up there, twist it, and voila, all the lights come on in the car. So we can see what channel we were on, we can see all the other things that we wanted to see. The funny thing about this is I bring this up because how many of you actually control your own auto lights now? How many of you have driven in a car where you have the lights automatically sensing? Okay, it happens. You know, you get so used to that you forget what it was like without it. And so what it really told us was, because we were talking about like, well, what are you going to discuss and what are the other things that we're going to be able to talk about? Automation is a part of all of our lives, whether you realize it or not. The fact that you don't have to turn your headlights on, you know, is almost scary, because the one point, right, where you're sitting there waiting for your kids to get done with practice or dance or whatever else, and you turn your lights on because you don't want to blind everybody in the building, and then you pull out of the parking lot and you forget that your lights aren't even on. So automation has affected us in a variety of different ways. But what automation is really about, it's a lot more than just workflow. Okay, automation is really about satisfying a particular need at that right time, right, during the appropriate scenarios, and it's always going to be based on need and data. Automation is about identifying what those needs are and how we're going to accomplish meeting those needs for us, right? And ultimately, all the pieces and parts of it, you just want to see the fit. Do you really care about the process on the backside? As a person who is consuming or acting within the entire process structure or the entire system, you don't. If you own the process and you worry about the data and the transparency, then you will. So when you think about automation, and we want to think about where we're headed and what the effects are going to be and how things are shifting and whatnot. If we step back and we say, what does getting sick, right, and automation have in common? If you've worked in InfoPath, that answers your question. All right. I won't make any bad more InfoPath chat. But automation is natural, right? It's in our biology. If you think about it, right, when you get sick, your body kicks in. If you're running a fever, certain things happen with your body, right? If you eat bad food, things happen to your body, okay? You get nervous before you're speaking in front of tech talks. Something happens to your body. So when you think through, let's see, there we go. All right, when we think through, right, ultimately as people, we end up adapting to our environment. We're very much a sense and respond kind of organism, right? Situations, right, they create fear and adrenaline, lifting cars, right, when people are injured. And then you also have the needs, right, that are associated with survivability, right, just basic hunger. When's this guy gonna get done talking so we can eat? You know, all of those kinds of things. Data and indicators are also gonna be what initiate actions. So for example, right, there's something in that light sensor that said, hey, we need to turn the lights on, or we need to turn the lights off. Or you have auto-sensing windshield wipers, okay? It doesn't seem like they ever go too fast or too slow, but they're there and they work most of the time. And your body is this organism, right? Ultimately, it is a system of systems. And all of these things are connected, right? They're connected up through your central nervous system, through your brain, that major processing power that enables you to do what you need to do. And you don't really control any of those things. The only time that you really are almost in control of some of, right, what's going on with your body is when those systems have failed or they don't work. And at that point, we have to take medicine or any of those other kind of things, right? But how many of you have seen those automatic insulin pumps? Right? That's automation. It's sensing and it's responding. And it's taking on a normal bodily function and digitizing it. So it's making those things happen for you. If we think about organizations, right, they have needs. Same thing, right? You can go through Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Organizations have the exact same things. They need customers, they need revenue, right? You have to have stuff coming in order for you to be able to produce the energy to sustain your organization. It's very sense and respond. What does the data tell us? What are we going to do with it? And then stakeholders, right? We're always initiating activities like purchase approvals. There's always going to be something that's going to occur within an organization that says we need to act upon this data. And so we also have these many different systems. I don't think I've ever seen one organization run on one system entirely. And I say that because, and when I think of a system, I think everything all the way down to the browser. And we say, oh, well, we're all Microsoft Office. I worked in top secret environments. And I can tell you that some people didn't like Microsoft Office. What do they use? They use Notepad. Or they use another, right? A pad and paper. So the systems are there. So what we're really forced to, right, deal with is how do we make these systems work together and work better? The main difference between, right, the organization and us as people, right, is that central nervous system. And that's the piece that's shifting, right? It was touched on the keynote earlier. But this piece is rapidly shifting. And this is where automation is starting to really adjust, okay? Now, if you think about it, right, and if you look at it, you almost have, right, the spinal system running through your body, connects all those nerves, and all those nerves are reaching into all those other systems, aren't they? And they're going to the brain, and the brain's acting upon something. So what we end up with, right, are these modern automation systems. And what they are is they're absolutely 100% adaptable, okay? They're connectable, right? They're connectable, right? I don't even know if that's spelled correctly, but Word didn't tell us so. Connectable to all these disparate systems. Unifying processes. Processes no longer, and this is why I felt it was important to address this. If we operate within the mindset that workflows and processes are going to be confined to a single technology, at some point, that system, that process, or that workflow is not going to be as relevant as it needs to be with regards to your organization. So that's what happens a lot of times in SharePoint. We'll go into environments or we'll talk with people, and there are scenarios where you might have an isolated instance and you have workflows running within your organization. Well, we also have to start thinking beyond those bounds. We have to start thinking beyond, at what point does this process connect up to another system or to another organization or to another group of people? If we're not asking ourselves those questions, then what we're doing is we're defining systems and processes that actually can be, right, completely almost vaporized at some point, because somebody else is going to come in and knock them out. Or your system is not going to be able to keep up with the changes that are needed. And then we have unifying processes. So if we think back to the whole central nervous system, and we think through what we need to make these systems connect, you almost have to have, right, this independent system that is able to cross all these organizational and these technological boundaries. Okay. So that way we're not binding a specific process or specific workflow to a particular technology. Because I get it, right? Every system out in the world has its own workflow engine to some degree. Everybody's starting to do it. But they all have their limits. And if you're building it within, right, that particular system, and we're not thinking about those other connections, we're not really thinking about the reality of how we're going to end up operating. At some point, your organization is going to have to work with another organization. They're also going to end up being intelligent. So the intelligent piece of it starts getting into machine learning. But if we go back and we start thinking through, right, all of the different pieces and all these processes and why it's so important to kind of for us to consider exactly what's going on in all of this, we have to realize that there is content all over the place. Oops, I don't know why it went ahead. All right, I guess that was automation, right, telling me that I need to hurry up because you guys are hungry. But if we look at it, you've got SharePoint, Dropbox, Box, Azure, Twitter, all these things. All these are systems that most of you are touching at some point or have touched. Okay, you could add ServiceNow to it. All these systems are going to be tied in together, and all these systems have content within them. And that content is going to be data that you need, or data that needs to be worked upon. So we start thinking a little bit ahead and how automation is sort of transforming here. Okay, a little bit earlier we saw Power Apps. We saw all those pieces and parts. Automation generally is going to start right now. It starts with point of need applications. In other words, I need to do something with this data. I need to act upon it. At that point, you are an actor into that system. So when we think about designing workflows and you think about designing processes, you look at your workflow and you identify how does it tie into what the larger process is. And when you're looking at your workflow, then you're also wanting to know, how are the people going to start this workflow? Right? Where does this process actually start? If admissions receives, right, an inquiry for, right, an upcoming senior or an upcoming junior, is that person tracked? Right, some of the schools I've dealt with, right, they'll enter in all their students and they track them in Salesforce. I can see it, right, with the CRM system. And they want to make sure they're getting scheduled releases and announcements and newsletters and all those activities. But you also think of point of need applications, like what if you're doing ground surveys and you have the Power App or you have an app, right, an Intex or whatever else, you're able to take the picture and you're able to identify what the problem is. You guys ever seen that? What is it? There's an application out there where you can identify potholes in the road for the cities. And that's point of need. Some of these places, though, it's like I can't hit my thumb. I need the 2 drumstick hand thing to hit them all, because there's so many potholes there. But you start thinking through, right, the cross-platform workflow solutions. We start thinking through, all right, so we have students have emailed in. They go into Salesforce. Once that goes into Salesforce, they've now provided you maybe transcripts. Maybe those transcripts are stored in Box. How do we have Salesforce and Box interacting with one another? Or maybe you're dealing with contracts and we want to have that contract uploaded into a Dropbox location. I'm not even talking Office 365 or SharePoint right now. We're talking about putting something into, right, an application or a system that people are familiar with. And then once that data or that document gets loaded into it, we have a process or a solution that's monitoring that location and say, hey, anytime a new document is uploaded here, fire this off to contracts. Let them know, notify them. That way we're not waiting, right? We're trying to add value into it. And we're also trying to address what that point of need is. So we start looking at, right, from a cross-platform standpoint, where you're ingesting data, how we're processing it, and how are you sending the data back out for that next stage, okay? And then from there, we start moving into machine learning. You get into machine learning, we start talking about proactive processing, right, based on predictive analytics. So my mother has to go through home dialysis right now, okay? They ship her everything she needs. She loads the bags in. She goes through dialysis treatment every night. But yet she still has to make, right, a phone call to order the bags. So she loads the bags into a digitized system that's connected to, right, the internet that uploads all of her log files. They know that they've sent her, right, enough to get by an entire, right, month, and then they give her, right, 3 or 4 extra bags. So let's just say in a 30-day month, she gets 33 bags. She still has to call them and let them know she needs more. I don't understand why. Maybe she has it all configured incorrectly, and that's a possibility. But the point is, though, right, for a full system, right, for a fully scoped process, we're talking about completing that circle of life. The point at which you have an actor who is consuming data, who's consuming a resource, and then automatically notifying them. It's not subscribing, it's notifying them, hey, what happens if she broke 4 bags? She's at 29. At what point would the system identify, hey, right, the burn rate through the bags is much greater. We need to go ahead and send them more bags. I've told my kids all the time, right? You'd be the richest person in the world if you could find a way to automatically refill toilet paper, right? And not ever have to do anything about it. Because they consume, they don't ever replace. I don't know, it feels like a Seinfeld episode, but ultimately, really, right, what we're talking about when we start getting into these connected devices is the ability for us to start taking action, for us to be able to take data in, process it, and then be able to take an action upon it. So imagine those windshield wiper blade sensors. Imagine the world where those sensors are going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and it knows how to run across your window and automatically has those windshield wipers delivered to you. Or, better yet, sends them to, right, the local service company, and they have them ready to install for you, and it schedules the appointment. That's when we start thinking about these systems of systems and be able to make those things happen, all right? And then we've already talked about this, so I'm not going to belabor this, but we're really talking about being able to take people, process, and content, and we're dealing with an entire pipeline of process automation, right? So when you look at that workflow and business process platform, I'm not looking at it from necessarily a holistic, I am looking at it from a holistic perspective of being able to separate what's processing your workflows and your system of systems separately, so that you have a workflow service bus, so to speak, that's being able to handle, right, those transactions back and forth. And that's where we start getting into, when you start wanting to be able to identify when to use something like a Nintex or a Flow, that's when you start looking at those items, because that's where their power really kicks in. You know, between Flow and Nintex Workflow Cloud, you're able to completely pull that piece away and cross over all these different systems that are needed. When we're starting to move forward, right, a big ingredient, and this is just some 3 things to keep in mind when people are wanting to say, all right, I want to automate something. It always starts with a dream. So it always starts with a good idea. Because if you don't start with that, you're not going to have the passion to keep seeing it through, because it's not always going to be the easiest piece. You also have to pick something where transparency is okay. If you're picking processes where people don't want to be able to show the data and how slow they are on signing documents, it's probably not going to be a good process for your first one to go down. And then be able to make a change for the positive. So make sure you can capture the data. So real quick, so this is a video, and I'm gonna hope that the sound works. Well, we'll try. So the reason why I wanted to show that video is we were leveraging Flow, Power Apps, and iPad. And you saw that we had the automatic email notifications. So we had people that were able to come in, right? Sean, right? Myself, and be able to automatically send and receive these notifications without having to do anything, all right? And so for us, that was the best way for us to be able to demo how we can have a system of systems to be able to handle the full transaction from a check-in to a checkout, and it even pulled in, right, the document from electronic document repository to show the NDA agreements and such. So appreciate you guys sticking around. I know that, is there another speaker? Is it lunchtime, right? There's another speaker. All right, so, all right, I don't feel so rushed anymore. Now it's up to them to get us through the lunch. So appreciate it. If you guys have any questions, feel free to ping me afterwards. And this is a great book, by the way. If you are looking for extra reading, Rise of the Robots is fantastic. It talks about automation, how it's going to affect jobs. If you've got teenagers, kids going to college, I'd highly recommend reading this book. It'll change your perspective on many different things. And then there's contact info.